On this day, 10th of October 2018, I like to take some time to communicate something about the work that I have done almost about 25 years ago. This work deals with human resource development in the context of a nation or society. It's well documented in this book, Human Resources Development Experiences, Interventions and Strategies. This is out of a work I have done with Commonwealth Secretariat between 1992 and 93, where we were preparing a report for the Commonwealth heads of government. Commonwealth Secretariat was given the task of learning from the experiences of better developed Commonwealth countries on what is the secret behind their development and what the less developed kind of countries can learn from them in terms of human resource development. This entire consultancy was based on the assumption that human resource development and economic development are two interrelated things. Sam Petroda was chairman of a task force which consisted of a number of people from across the Commonwealth world, which included some ministers from Ghana and Commonwealth Secretariat London itself and other countries. I was given the task of doing a lot of library research, visiting some of the countries, and of course I think the countries included India itself, and come up with my observations about the lessons that can be drawn from the well-developed countries. I reviewed the experiences of Commonwealth countries like the United Kingdom itself, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and a number of other countries, and looked at the low-lying human development countries like India, Bangladesh, and Nepal, and a whole lot of other South Asian countries. Though among South Asian countries, Sri Lanka is well developed in terms of the human resources and so on. I must say that this particular book, for which the foreword was written by Dr. Mohan Kaul, who was director of Management Development Division, Management and Training Services Division. The foreword was written in March 1995. The report was completed in the year 1993 itself, and subsequently the report formed a basis of another report called Foundation for Future uh, under the chairmanship of Sam Petroda, and that was circulated to the Commonwealth heads of government. Since I did not attend that particular kind of a meeting and it is meant for heads of government, I really don't know what happened to the report and what is it that various governments have done. But I must say that whatever we have concluded, both in that report as well as in this book on human resources development, which is even available today, situation has not changed. Principles are more or less the same. I'd like to take this opportunity to read out a few passages from this particular book. In the first chapter itself, when talking about the concept of human resource development, I start with a statement: people make things happen. People make things happen. If people have to make things happen, they need a set of circumstances to make them happen. However, it is the people who create circumstances that can help them and others in making things happen. So, in other words, we are saying people are the focus of development, and both they are the consequences and causes of development. They are affected by development and they affect development. So, I have defined HRD as the process of enabling people to make things happen. Human resource development is the process of enabling people to make things happen. It deals both with the process of competency development in people and creation of conditions through public policy programs and other interventions to help people apply these competencies for their own benefit and for that of others. These are many things included and implied in such a definition of HRD. A quite number of these things I have explained in this book, uh, and I've also equated human development, which I think UNDP was very popularly using, as human resources development. Human development and human resource development, I have said more or less in this particular book, we treat them as same kind of things. Uh, I have, of course, started with my preface. Human resource development deals with creating conditions that enable people to get the best out of themselves and their lives. Development is a never ending process. As people develop themselves in new directions, new problems and issues arise, requiring them to develop new competencies to meet the changing requirements, aspirations, and problems. There are, however, some universal goals towards which all human resource development efforts should aim to achieve. And I talked of at individual level, what are these goals? At organizational level, what are these goals? At national level, what are these goals? Organizational level, in the past I have talked a lot about it. But let me talk about what we have said at the national level. At national level, human resource development aims at ensuring that people in a country or in the country where they belong live longer, live happily, free of disease and hunger, have sufficient skill base to earn their own livelihood and well being, have a sense of belongingness and pride through participation in determining their own destinies. The promotion of the well being of individuals, families, and societies provide a human resource agenda for the countries of the world over. I think this is the most important thing that is explained in this particular book. And when this book came out in 1995, most of the people who know me as a HRD uh, facilitator, founder of National HRD Network, also the founder of the Academy of Human Resource Development, and were associating me with the corporate sector. And they were quite stunned and surprised that I have done this work, applied HRD to nation. Now, I must say that both to me, to Dr. Uday Pari, who were the founders of the HRD movement in the country by establishing the first dedicated Human Resource Development Department in 1975, and also naming the new changed personnel function as Human Resource Function. Uh, Human resources always meant human resources in the larger context of the world. People everywhere, every part of the world. I must say that I am greatly influenced by the work of people like famous psychologists, many psychologists, and of them certainly since I happen to have the privilege and fortune of working with Dr. David McClellan of Harvard University. David's biggest contribution, which influenced me in my work in 1992, I spent a few months with David McClellan at Harvard in 1975. That was the time when I read in depth at his work, developed the psychosocial maturity scale. And the most impressive thing about David's work was that uh, entrepreneurial actions or economic achievement of a nation depends on entrepreneurial activities. Entrepreneurial activities come from the kind of stories you tell children uh, and socialize them so that their psychological thinking gets influenced. So, psychological thinking or orientation makes you to think entrepreneurially, and thought. In other words, thought leads to action, and it is language that leads to thought. And therefore, if you can give a person an entrepreneurial language, achievement language, you can perhaps cause economic development. So, psychological education has been found to be of immense uh, importance in building entrepreneurial education. The same thing translated to organizational effectiveness. Subsequently, McClelland wrote that if you can use expert power, institutional power, or power that is meant to serve a larger society, you become an institution builder and you become an effective manager. And he called that particular manager as an institutional manager. So, on one hand, on entrepreneurship, on the other hand, in the context of an institution building were two of the concepts that have tremendously influenced me. And that is why in 1992, when I was doing this work of the lessons that we can learn from Commonwealth world, particularly the developed world of Commonwealth, I started looking at various experiences. And I think what has been written in this particular book at the time in 1992, 93, and published in 95 even is valid today 100%. It's valid. Now, what is it that is valid? In this book and in this work, we concluded if people in a country or people in a society have to be well developed, and we borrowed the same concept of UNDP uses human development. We can consider people in a country as well developed if they know how to live longer and if they have good quality of life. And in order to have good quality of life, they should have certainly a good skill base, which is, of course, crudely measured by mean years of schooling and such kind of indices. But I think the whole question is how do you get educated? Today, of course, there are many avenues by which people get educated. Even if they can't read and write, they can at least listen and speak using other kind of media. Still, they can get well educated and so on. Now, there are a few imperatives we identified in this particular work for any nation to build its human resources. Imperative number one, of course, these are not in any sequence, these are all imperatives. And these imperatives are not our contributions. These imperatives are drawn from the work of a whole lot of people, including South Commission, which in towards late 80s, for which the secretary, if I recollect right, was Dr. Manmohan Singh, who was at that time with the Reserve Bank of India, and also I think he was highly involved in government. I think Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Secretary General of the South Commission, and the chairman was Kenneth. I think of Tanzania. I think the Prime Minister, the President of Tanzania was the. So they spent a lot of time again doing the same kind of a task, and they came up with a report, which of course we borrowed when we started looking at the secrets of well-developed Commonwealth countries and lessons for, I think, less developed countries, are more or less the same. What has been talked about in South Commission are more or less the same kind of similar imperatives. I think these imperatives, number one, of course, that if you want any country to develop in terms of, and first of all, we start with the assumption human resource development and economic development are highly interlinked. No economic development can take place in a sustainable way if people in that particular country are not developed. But the question is, how do you develop people in the country unless you are economically developed? Whatever economic development takes place, you should be able to invest a part of that economic development or your resources or part of the output of the economic development in building people. It is really the kind of HR policies or economic and HR policies which are interlinked with each other, which make the country to prosper both economically and human resources wise. In fact, I think the biggest theory in this is that if you develop economically, you must invest a part of it in developing people so that it is people who can make economic development happen. There are excellent examples of countries that have developed economically, but did not have the right HR policies, and they did, their economic development did not sustain much longer. I think in those years, if you really look at 90s and so on, countries like Nigeria are good examples. At one point of time, Nigeria was on the top of the world. If you look at in 80s and perhaps late 80s and so on, with a wonderful kind of an economic kind of background. But I think they may not have invested in building people the right way. So if economic development takes place and it is not, uh, it doesn't, it's not facilitated or it's not used appropriately in having right kind of HR policies, economic development will not become sustainable at all. So I think the conclusion was that if you want sustainable economic development, you have to have sustainable human resource development, or your HRD or HR policies. HRD, I would say, human resource development policies have to be appropriately managed by government. I think from 1990s, post-liberalization, till today, in the last 18 years, my own belief is the country had right kind of HRD policies. There may be gaps in terms of a few sectors like education, investment in some of research, in the way I think we have managed the health and so on. There certainly could be gaps, but I think our policies have been right. There was no issue in the last 15 to 18 years in terms of our human resource development policies. The allocations may have could have been certainly better. The management of institutions could have been better, but I think the policies were certainly in the right kind of direction, and we owe a lot of it to the phenomenal wisdom that we have gained by from people like Dr. Manmohan Singh and a number of others who, even before joining the government, worked on major important issues of the economic development and the linkages with human resource development. Now, what are these HR policies? What are the HR imperatives that which I am talking about? Imperative number one, not in that particular sequence, is that if a country has to develop, we have no alternative but to invest on educating the children. Primary and secondary education, which we have called as universalization of education and a whole lot of things, because you need to equip people with the instruments required for building their own kind of a capital. If you have to build your capital, you should have access to the instruments of building capital. Reading, writing, arithmetic, or education and skill base are the most important essential tools that you have in order to tools that you have in order to build your own kind of a livelihood. So if you have to live longer and you should have the right skill base, I think the government policies will have to promote investments in primary education. Very, very important. And at that time, we also talked of innumerable number. I think if you look at the literacy percentage of literate people in countries like India, it was pathetically low, something like 30 to 40%, and 60% of the population were not even uh, literate, can't read and write, and that is how the National Adult Education Program started sometime in the year 1978 and so on. But that's not the only one. There were non-formal education centers and a whole lot of other kind of things. So the first imperative is the country should invest on educating all newborn people. All children have to be educated. Access to schooling is very important. And it is not enough if you give access to schooling of young people. You also need to provide enough of secondary school education so that they can even go to the colleges and so on. So invest on primary education, invest on secondary education, invest on skill development. In those days, we called it as vocational education, technical and vocational education. We suggested that is very important, because if you don't do that, I think there can be no access to employment and things of that kind. Having said that, you must do primary education, secondary education, and provide opportunity for children to go to schools, etc., etc. We have also identified the importance of investing on high-level technology institutions, which I think meant start institutions like the IITs, engineering colleges, medical colleges, all professional educational institutions If the country does not invest in science and technology and also promote professional education institutions, the country is not likely to develop well. So there is a fourth kind of an imperative that we talked of. And I think the reason why India has a lot of respect across the world is because India's science and technology are fairly competitive and globally competitive, and we have globally known scientists and technologists who have made a mark. The other point, the fifth point we have talked about at the point of time, was the importance of educating the girl child. Women's empowerment and educating girl child is a very important imperative, because if you educate a girl child, uh, an educated mother can educate not only her children but the entire surroundings, entire kind of a family. We discovered investments on women, girl child can have multiple impact in terms of uh, enhancing the quality of life, enhancing the skill base, enhancing so many things. Therefore, this was another imperative that we talked of. The other thing we talked of is the health, basic health for all. I think we need to do invest enough on people so that they maintain, they are physically fit, they are free of disease. In this context, we have also said it's very, very important to bring down the infant mortality rate and the survival rate, and therefore by providing all kinds of facilities, ensure that children live longer. Not only children live longer, an average citizen lives much longer in the world and so on. I think that is what we talked of in this as a part of the primary and secondary education has to be there. Science education has to be promoted and so on. We need good government. Good government means good governance. Good governance means good civil servants. Good civil servants means making them managerially effective and entrepreneurially sound. Therefore, the other imperative is train the government officers so that they will become flexible, entrepreneurial, and they become greatly supportive of all the development policies. We also recognize at the time all this cannot be done by government alone. That is why it is very important to promote and not-for-profit organizations or NGOs. Invest enough on NGOs. In fact, in this book, there is a full chapter on NGOs. There is another chapter on government entrepreneurship and so on. So these were the kind of imperatives, and this is what is given in this particular book in various chapters. This particular book, Human Resource Development, Experiences, Interventions, and Strategies. If you look at this particular book, this book has uh, very interesting kind of contents. This book has a total of about 18 chapters. The 18 chapters deal with, the first three chapters deal with human resource development concept and background, human resources and economic development, that is the second chapter. Third is strategic interventions and overview. And in the second, strategic interventions in HRD sector and target groups are talked about: health, basic education, adult education, technical and vocational education, higher education, science and technology, environment, empowerment of women, entrepreneurial skills for the poor and unemployed. That is the second section. In the third section, strategic process interventions for HRD, which includes using NGOs, decentralizing and creating enabling practices, mobilizing resources, enabling coordination, professionalizing government, and ultimately the role of government in policy formulation and implementation and things of that kind. So this is the wonderful book we have written. Sometimes I think I was tempted to revise this book, and I said to myself that David McCullen has not revised his Achieving Society. Why do I revise this? Let it remain as a monumental work. I don't rule out the possibility that I will add some cases, but unfortunately, to the best of my knowledge, whatever has happened in the last 20 to 25 years, I think major thing is technological revolution that has taken place. But other things, attitudes of people, values of people remain more or less at the same kind of a level. So, friends, I think human resource development, the moment you start looking at from a national level, your entire outlook as a HRD person or as a citizen of a country changes. I wish you have an opportunity to read this book. I'm sure you will enjoy this particular kind of a book, although it is now 25 years dated. All the best from TVRLS, and my best wishes to you to be an able contributor to the society and to yourself. All those who are born on this day,